Hello again. I am in some woods near a rest stop a little bit south of Salem, Oregon right now. And yes, this is my first video with my new hair. And yes, it does stick up like that. I have cowlick here, and apparently I also have a cowlick here. I never knew, but I've tried wetting it down. It doesn't matter how I slept that night. This part of my hair also sticks up, but not the other side. So, my hair has always kind of done whatever it wanted anyway. I try to just go with it. Anyway, moving on. So, I have not, despite my promise to the contrary, addressed a whole lot of PTSD issues so far on my trip. And, to be honest, one of the reasons is I haven't been having a lot of issues. I think that removing myself from the living situation that I was in was a positive thing for me as far as symptom. And I'm not advocating, let's be clear, I'm not advocating running away from your problems, and I'm not necessarily advocating people with PTSD running away from the things that upset them. I don't think that solves problems. But from a childhood abuse standpoint, it seems that for a lot of people, separating themselves from family, whether that be temporary or permanent, and it doesn't necessarily have to be like completely disowning them, sometimes just gaining a little bit of autonomy from them can bring a lot of healing and a lot of positive things for the person who is abused. So for me, this road trip has brought, I have sparklies. For me, this road trip has brought some immediate relief of symptoms. Now, I'm not fooled into thinking that means that I'm really any better on the inside, and I know that, but it has been really nice for me to just kind of get some breathing space. So that's been good. Unfortunately, I had a little bit of a reminder of kind of how broken I am recently. So I had mentioned that I had volunteered with Meals on Wheels people and that it was a very positive experience. And I had even met a couple people who offered to help me out, show me what resources are available for people who need a little bit of help getting back on their feet, that kind of stuff. So one such person offered to show me around after volunteering on Saturday. And he was a guy. He was probably old enough to be my dad, and he had been very respectful and concerned for my well-being on the 3 days that I had volunteered. He had even been concerned about another young guy who had offered to take me to the Rose Garden. I assumed that because this person was concerned about other people being creepy, that he himself would not be a creeper, which is a stupid thing to assume, because human beings are hypocrites all the time. Anyway, you can tell now by my comments kind of what's going to come next. He showed me around, and I had just cut my hair to the short length but not buzzed it at this time, and he wanted to touch my new haircut. So he touched my new haircut, and then he was kind of letting his hand linger on my shoulder, and I was like, okay, he's being supportive. I really don't like to be touched, so my feelings of discomfort I kind of shoved away, because I was like, well, that's just me being my normal, antisocial self. So he took me to a bar and bought me a glass of wine, which is fine. It was, we'd been walking a long time. I had complained that I was hot because I was wearing long pants and stuff from volunteering, and it was super hot outside. So we went inside. It's not that the alcohol was an issue for me. I'm fine with having a glass of wine. I'm a regular glass or two of wine drinker. But then he started stroking my back, and then his hand was on my thigh. And of course at this point I was like, stop touching me, I don't like to be touched, don't do that. And I actually shoved his hands away several times. And every time I did it, it would seem like, okay, he would stop right away. I mean, he was non-confrontational about it, and we'd talk, and he was still telling me about what resources are available, where to go, where not to go, you know, all this stuff. And so I felt like I needed the information that he had, and I almost was in a position now where I felt like I had to put up with what he was doing to me in order to receive help. And you know, it all, in the moment, you don't really examine a lot of these feelings. You just kind of do what you think you need to do at the time. And I kept shoving his hands away and be like, no, I don't want to be touched. No, I don't want to be touched. And then he would stop for a little while, and then he would start touching me again. And then he wanted to touch my hands, and I was like, no, I don't want to touch. Just leave my hands alone. And he's like, no, no. And he started insisting on touching my hands. And so I finally let him touch my hands, and he's like, see, that's not a big deal. Like, he was trying to, like, get me comfortable with touching my hands and then move on from there. I'm not really sure. He seemed, you know, a little tipsy, drunkish. So maybe it wouldn't have been so creepy if he hadn't been drinking. But I believe that he's a habitual drinker. And so by the time I finally got mad and decided that I was done with this, it was kind of late, and I ended up having to smack him pretty hard and yell at him in the middle of the street, which was weird, but of course nobody even looked. It's Portland, it's the middle of downtown, it's very busy. But then I had to find my way to the bus stop by myself, which is fine, because I have Google Maps. And that's what I said to him. I was like, I don't need your help to find the bus stop. And he was like, fine, find it on your own. I was like, I will, and then walked away. But afterwards, I felt really damaged by what happened. I felt very guilty that I hadn't stopped it sooner. And, you know, why did I let this guy go on touching me like this? Like, you know, immediately some evil part of you wants to tell you, and maybe this is from society and maybe this is natural human nature, I really don't know, wants to tell you that it's somehow your fault because you didn't do enough to stop it. And I think that this would have been a really uncomfortable and maybe traumatic situation for any young woman alone in a strange city where she needs help. But for someone who is a survivor of sexual assault, which is like 1/3 of the female population of the United States, and I personally believe that that statistic is low because so much of this kind of stuff goes underreported. It churned up a lot of stuff for me. And I actually spent the whole next day, which was Sunday, I was so depressed that I just sat in my car the whole day and stared out of the window. Like, I wasn't even bored. I was completely immobilized that entire day. And I kind of went back and forth after that about whether I was going to be able to volunteer again. I thought, well, you know, I made it clear he probably... I would assume that he would probably kind of act like nothing ever happened. Like, it seemed like not a big deal to him anyway. I had to hit him just in order to convince him that I was actually angry at him. Like, it didn't process. So maybe I could have gone back, but you know, it became clear to me over the course of the next few days that I'm not emotionally able to handle that right now with where I am with the PTSD. And a lot of stuff came flooding back after that. A lot of stuff that I hadn't really had troubles with since I left on this trip, such as kind of reliving a lot of really negative experiences from the last couple years. Having arguments with people, non-existent people in my head, well, people from my past or whatever, you know. You know how, like, when you have an altercation with someone and always afterwards you think of the right thing to say? you know, and you're like, man, if I could just go back to that moment, I would have had the perfect zinger or the perfect defense for myself when I didn't defend myself very appropriately before. I have perfectly good reasons for whatever it is. That kind of stuff. But then I'll like have these arguments in my head, and I'll get myself really worked up and just tied into a knot, just freaking out, sitting there like staring off into nothing in my car. And then I'll stop and be like, whoa, wait, what am I doing? You know, so I eventually sent an email to the person I'd originally talked to about volunteering and actually described my experience in detail. And I struggled with whether this was the right thing to do, because what are they going to do about it? I mean, it seems a little bit like causing trouble for no reason. And yet I am so against the culture of shame and silence that we have created in society that keeps women thinking that it's their fault, or keeps them not speaking up because other people will think that it's their fault because of the way they dress, because of what they did, because they didn't say no loud enough, you know. And it seemed like not only the right thing to do socially because of how I feel about it, but honestly, psychologically speaking, for me, that was, I believe, the healthiest route for me, was to speak up. And I don't care if they, you know, they don't have the authority to punish him. And that's not what I'm looking for. I don't care if anything bad happens to him or he has any repercussions whatsoever from this event. What I care about is speaking up and also explaining why I'm not going to volunteer with them again. You know, and I said, I really, you know, enjoyed my time with your organization. I really wanted to volunteer more, but here's why I'm not going to. So, yeah, I did feel kind of like this would be you know, something that other people wouldn't agree with after I'd done it, and I struggled with it a little bit, but honestly, I feel better having done it.